What's up guys, welcome to BlueBotTech. Today we're going to be giving you a quick guide on how to set up Octoprint for your 3D printer. Now if you've never used Octoprint before, it basically allows you to manage your 3D printer remotely. It lets you do things like turning on and off the printer, manually controlling the stepper motors, adjusting temperature remotely, and a number of other things. So for today's setup, you're going to need a Raspberry Pi 3 or 3 Plus or greater to run this Octoprint. You're going to need a Raspberry Pi power supply, and you're going to need a micro SD card, and I'm going to recommend about 16 gigabytes of size. Also, you can have a webcam, which is optional for monitoring your print remotely. And depending on your printer, you're either going to need a micro to USB cable or a mini to USB cable. And for this guide, I'll be using my Ender 3 Pro as an example because that's what I own. With that being said, I'll leave a link in the description for a list of supported printers that you can use with Octoprint.
Alright guys, so the first thing that we need to do is go ahead and open up a web browser. We're going to go to octoprint.org. Then we're going to go ahead and scroll down to download to get to the downloads page. And then we're going to download the latest version of Octopi. So once that's downloaded, we're going to go ahead and open up a flashing software of your choosing. I personally like with the Raspberry Pi Imager, but you can use Balena Etcher. It's really your choice. And since this isn't a brand new microSD card that I'm using, I'm going to go ahead and format that to prepare it for the Raspberry Pi image. And once that's done formatting, we're going to go ahead and load up our Octopi image that we just downloaded. Choose your SD card and then click write. Yes. Click continue. Alright, before we remove the SD card, we're going to go ahead and make one more change to the Octopi settings. Go ahead and open up your SD card in your file browser. And what we're looking for is the Octopi WPA supplicant.txt file. And this is the file that allows you to enable Wi-Fi. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and uncomment the section for the WPA and WPA2 secured block, and this will signal to our Raspberry Pi that we do want to enable Wi-Fi for this. Now go ahead and uncomment it and then put in your Wi-Fi SSID and then whatever your Wi-Fi password is right here. And just a side note guys, if you're using a Raspberry Pi 3 or 3 Plus, you also have to uncomment the country code in this file. Once you've done that, go ahead and click File Save. So once our Raspberry Pi is fully booted up, we're going to go ahead and SSH into it. We're going to be using PuTTY. So what we need to do is go ahead and put in octopi.local, and we're using port 22 for SSH. We're going to go ahead and click open, and the default login for this image is going to be Pi, and then the password is going to be Raspberry. Alright, so the reason that we SSH'd into the Raspberry Pi is that we're going to go ahead and change the default password. So we're going to type in sudo raspi tac config, press enter, make sure you type the password correctly. Alright, so we're going to go using our arrow keys and the enter key. We're going to go to system options. We're going to go down to password, and then you're going to go ahead and enter whatever password that you want.
Alright, so once your Raspberry Pi is all plugged in, you're going to want to connect your micro USB or mini USB to USB cable into your Raspberry Pi and your 3D printer. You should find the port around the SD card slot on your 3D printer. And if you're choosing to use a webcam for this, you can also plug in your webcam into the webcam port. One issue I had when I was setting up this build for the first time is that I plugged my webcam into the USB 3.0 port, and it just straight up didn't work. So once I unplugged it, plugged it into the USB 2.0 port, it worked perfectly. And just a side note, if you wanted a cleaner look, you can also power your Raspberry Pi Octoprint server via your 3D printer's power supply. and this will just require a little bit of extra work and some soldering. I'll leave a link in the description for a guide to do that.
Alright, so once that's done, we're going to go ahead and open up a web browser, and we're going to type in octopi.local. What this is your web user interface for your Octopi server that we just set up on your Raspberry Pi. So for the first time setting it up, it's going to give you a setup wizard. We're going to go through that really quick here. We're not going to mess with the restore from backup right now. Access control, you definitely do want to put in a username and password for this one. Create account. Then go ahead and hit next. So for configure anonymous usage tracking, this is just really personal preference here. For me, I'll be disabling it, but you choose whatever you prefer. So for configure connectivity check, we're going to go ahead and click enable connectivity check. And so what this does is it allows your Octopi server to reach out into the internet to really just check for updates to keep it as up to date as possible. Alright, for here we're going to go ahead and enable plugin blacklist processing. And this basically prevents abusive and defective plugins from being used with your version of Octoprint. And an example of this would be if you're using a version of Octoprint that is known to not work with a certain plugin, this blacklist will basically automatically prevent the plugin from being used to prevent any issues. Alright, so the setup printer profile doesn't really matter what we put in here. I'm going to go ahead and put in Ender 3 Pro because that's what I'm using, but it doesn't really matter what you put, if I can type. For the print bed and build volume, these settings are going to be dependent on the printer that you're using. And as I said before, I'm going to be using the Ender 3 Pro. So for the form factor, I'll keep that as rectangular. Origin lower left. It does have a heated bed. We're going to leave heated chamber unchecked. And then the width is going to be 220. The depth is going to be 220 and the height is going to be 250. And again, this will change depending on the type of printer that you're using. So go ahead and Google the type of printer that you have and check the print volume and any other settings that you may need. For the Ender 3 Pro, we do not need a custom bounding box. So we're going to leave that unchecked. Alright, click axis. We're going to leave this as default. And then the hot end and extruder is everything looks good as is. Click next. And then we're all done. Alright, so this is the main home page for the Octoprint web user interface. We can go ahead and click connect to connect our Octopi. So for organizational purposes, you can create folders and upload files directly into this little interface. And we're going to go ahead and upload a file right quick. And if you've just downloaded an STL file from a website like Thingiverse and you don't have it converted to G-code just yet, we're going to go ahead and open up Cura and show you how to do that really quick. Alright, so Cura is my preferred slicer program, so I'm going to go ahead and open up the STL file in Cura. And because this is just a test print, I'm not really going to mess with the settings too much. I'm going to go ahead and click slice. And that should pretty much take care of anything that we really need. Alright, let's save this G-code to file. Alright, let's go ahead and upload that file. And there you go. Alright, so once that's uploaded, you can either start the print by clicking this load and print button right here, or you can just click the text itself to get that print loaded. And here we can manually adjust the temperature if we wanted to. Of course, the print will automatically do it for us. Just a side note, the light blue is the desired temperature that your print bed is going to be at. And then the dark blue is the current temperature. So you can kind of watch your printer prepare for the print as it raises in temperature. The control tab, if you have a webcam plugged into your Raspberry Pi, this will show the output here. And this is a really cool screen because you can control it manually right here with the keys. You can auto home the X, Y, and Z axis, and you can also manually extrude or retract the filament. And then this screen is kind of cool too. If you're hovered over the screen, you can go ahead and use the arrow keys to adjust the printer manually. Alright, the G-code viewer is not particularly useful for us. It just basically is another visualization of the file that we're currently running. terminal, again, we're not really going to mess around with this. Now the time lapse, if you're just using a webcam for this is pretty useful. You can go ahead and click timed or on z-axis change time lapse. I would go ahead and recommend on z-axis change over timed. And basically every time your printer moves up a layer, it's going to go ahead and take a snapshot. And basically this is going to give you a little time-lapse video of the entire print, which is pretty cool. Click save for that. Now this Octolapse tab is probably not going to show up by default for you. This is a separate plugin that we're going to go ahead and cover in a different video, hopefully in the next week or two. Alright, and that's basically it. There's not too much else to this. And we can go ahead and check out a quick time lapse of the test print that we just loaded up. And again, we're hoping to have the Octolapse plugin video out within the next week or two.
I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like or subscribe if you found it useful. Like I said before, we're going to be coming out with the Octolapse tutorial here within the next week or two. So definitely subscribe so you can keep updated on that. All right, thank you.